Welcome to the 2012 summit of the International Transport Forum. Seamless Transport, Making Connections.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third and final day of the International Transport Forum 2012 Summit in Leipzig. I hope you had some good days here already. My name is Monica Jones. I had the pleasure to moderate a few sessions over the last couple of days. It was a very exciting, a very informative experience for me, and I very much look forward to the session we will get started in just a short while. Now, you will have noticed that we have moved location from the exhibition center to the Gewandhaus, right at the heart of the city of Leipzig. Don't know if you're very familiar with the Gewandhaus, its history. I'm not going to bore you with facts and figures, but it certainly is a very famous concert hall. It also has a very famous orchestra, the Gewandhaus Orchestra. And I learned today that the orchestra has a motto which is called "True joy is a serious matter." I thought it somehow fits with what we're doing here, because obviously transport business, making seamless connections can be a very serious matter, but I hope you enjoy the way to making it seamless, to build connectivity. I hope this is an enjoyable process for you, and certainly the people who will use all those vehicles and transport modes should enjoy having it available to them. So before we get started and focus on collaboration in connectivity, we are very happy to have the mayor of Leipzig in our midst, and I would like to ask Mr. Burkhard Meyer on the stage for some welcome words for us.
Thank you very much for these greetings. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, colleagues, guests, speakers, Minister Morlock, a welcome to all of you. Again, we are very happy to have you here in Leipzig. Leipzig, a perfect model city, a perfect prototype of a modern European city. Perfect? Yes, with all its imperfections and problems that European cities currently have to face. Perfect also as an example for how we have to deal with the challenges of our time in respect to our economical, financial, ecological, and personal resources. And yes, maybe also a good example for how we tackle our problems together with our partners and for our search for new solutions. Collaboration in connectivity not only stands for the organizations behind the providers of mobility, like public transport or the public administration, but also for the people living and working in the cities. Seamless transport does not mean just to transfer between different modes of transport in a short time. It's about the people who have to accept the offers and use the different modes of transport to fulfill their mobility needs. In order to reach a level of sustainable mobility, there are still many more steps to go. European cities have reached a good starting position to continue on this path. In Leipzig, there is a good share of people using public transport already today. With the opening of the new rail service through the new built city tunnel by the end of next year, I hope so, Mr. Morlock, there will be, sure, you've heard it, there will be a whole new perspective for the people of Leipzig and for the whole metropolitan area of central Germany to use the new rail service. The region will move closer to our city, and it will be faster to reach the city center by train than by car for many, many destinations. This will lead us, hopefully, to a better understanding in the region with our neighbors around Leipzig, in the state of Saxony, in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, and the Free State of Thuringia. Collaboration also means to follow the same goals and coordinate interests and support chances. Bringing people together is a great responsibility. To bring people to work, children to school, or customers to the city, or enabled people to a cultural event. Leipzig enjoys taking part in the initiative, we call it in Germany, Ab in die Mitte, which translates to let's go to the center. Even if you have an attractive downtown, it's still important to market it again and again and again. My last example for connectivity, for bringing people together, is our mobility master plan that we are currently discussing in Leipzig. First, there is the discussion at the round table for transport, consulted by scientific expertise. Next, we organized a citizen contest for good ideas for solutions in local transport for 1 year. The contest is supported by the Federal Minister of Transport, Building and Urban Development and started a completely new attempt how to include people's opinions in a very early stage of a general master plan of transport. I'm longing for that results. As we could see with the recent public discussions of our new bicycle master plan, including the citizens, is the key for good results and a high level of acceptance. I'm sure there are plenty of good examples in your cities and regions, and I'm looking forward to our discussions, sharing experiences and inspiring new ideas, and I hope for a good morning here in the city, and maybe you will follow me on my bike tour this afternoon. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jung. I would love to follow you on the bicycle this afternoon. Sadly, I have to return to Berlin very soon, but I can only encourage everybody of you who has time to do so. Leipzig is a beautiful city, and riding a bicycle in this weather must be really a great treat. Okay, let's get started with the session, which we will begin with a very interesting keynote speech. It will be held by Catherine L. Ross. She is the director of the Georgia Institute of Technology Center for Quality Growth and Regional Development. Now, the center was selected in 2012 as a top 10 transportation research center by the US Department of Transportation. Ms. Ross knows an awful lot about mega regions, and she's going to tell us all about it. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, and welcome ministers, service providers, and special guests. I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you about how to achieve greater connectivity and seamless transport. Transport is connectivity. Our challenge then is how do we make that connectivity smooth? How do we make it continuous with minimum disruption? You will note I did not say with no disruption. This morning, in the brief time we have together, I'm going to give a broad overview of megaregions. Megaregions are networks of urban centers and surrounding areas that are connected by economic, social, and infrastructure relationships. They capture economic and network interactions in a spatial context. They are one answer to the new economic relationships operating in national, regional, and world markets. They offer us the opportunity to achieve more seamless transport that supports economic growth, but they also present a number of challenges. Working in China, Africa, and Europe over the last 6 years with a number of individuals and organizations, I would say the viability of megaregions has improved. It is an appropriate method to help us achieve more unified transport. The world's largest 40 megaregions cover only a tiny fraction of the habitable surface of our planet. They are home to fewer than 18% of the world's population, but they account for 66% of all economic activity and about 85% of technological and scientific innovation. This is the economic and spatial reality we live in, but we do not plan in this way. This is very evident in the United States, and so it was out of a sense of concern and perhaps a bit of panic that I, myself, and others around the globe began to work to identify megaregions and relevant metrics to explore further both their usefulness and potential. Over half the world now lives in cities, but by 2050, over 70% of the world's population will be urban dwellers. By then, only 14% of people in rich countries and 33% in poor countries will live outside cities. Currently, the biggest megaregions are the Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, China megaregion, home to approximately 120 million people. The Nagoya, Osaka, Kyoto, Kobe, Japan megaregion, expected to exceed 60 million people by 2015, very close. The Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo region with 43 million people in Brazil. We can see evidence of this same trend in the fast-growing urban corridors. For example, the 600 kilometers linking Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and Ghana, and in India, the fast-growing corridor linking Mumbai to Delhi. Over the next 30 years, approximately 70% of the US population will live in close to the country's 10 megaregions, shown here. What is not shown here is the fact that 80% of our gross domestic produce, 95% of all of patents, and these 10 megaregions are home to 90% of our multinational corporations. The major tasks in megaregions, particularly for transport planning, include the development of a regional vision and goals, the shaping of a regional identity around which stakeholders can coalesce, financing tools applied to infrastructure across jurisdictions, and the development of standardized data sharing, analytics, and information collection systems. Cities anchor megaregions. Greater London, Shanghai, and Paris are dominant global cities influencing big geographic areas that influence surrounding areas and global markets. Megaregion transport planning may generate significant economic, social, and mobility benefits with great potential to provide seamless transport. Some of the areas that obviously would benefit are freight and passenger movements where we currently plan to the end of a jurisdiction or the end of a corridor, economic development and competitiveness, infrastructure investment decisions, which are now made in a very piecemeal manner, high-speed and intercity rail and highway improvements, natural resources management, disaster planning, and evacuation. The spatial boundaries of megaregions are not rigid. In fact, different criteria may be used to accomplish different goals and objectives. They reflect regional growth and prosperity, but are also quite flexible. A primary challenge, now and in the future, is how to combine the effectiveness of federally or regionally proposed projects with those developments locally that may serve different and sometimes competing mobility needs. Efforts to define and plan for megaregions is happening throughout the world. In the United States, new organizations, like the Piedmont Alliance for Quality Growth, composed of 6 states in the Southeast, have been created through public-private partnerships to work across jurisdictions to implement water, energy, and transportation projects in the Piedmont Atlantic megaregion. In fact, our previous mayor, Shirley Franklin, was a big lobbyist for transportation improvements in states other than Georgia and other than the city of Atlanta, where she was mayor. The membership of this alliance is comprised largely of private companies, mayors, and universities. European and Asian countries are establishing strategies to respond to rapidly increasing transportation demands and to promote economic growth while preserving green environments. The European Union's transport policy and China's practice to encourage transport decisions that are made at the level of the Beijing and Shanghai megaregions are examples. What then is the architecture of the megaregion? How do we move past geographic boundaries and corridor-based planning to link centers that drive our economies? How do we form regional identities and service agreements across borders? How do we shape our transport system to meet more complex demands and multiple objectives? There's evidence that a megaregion framework might result in significantly different and better investment decisions across all modes. For example, high-speed rail alignments might vary by as much as 25% in the United States when compared to location decisions based on conventional regional and corridor level planning. This culture of collaboration demands an incentive-based financing system provided at all levels that supports projects which cross jurisdictions and address regional needs. One idea, the new regionalism is how I would refer to it, shifts the institutional structure from government to governance and emphasizes public and private partnerships and joint ventures. This includes a shift away from traditional hierarchical planning towards a horizontal and network-based planning that ignores constraints posed by existing political boundaries. The following examples represent cross-region transport planning. The Seoul megaregion, with more than 20 million people in South Korea, has increased its interactions with the Busan metropolitan area and opened a high-speed rail network, forming the Seoul-Busan corridor. The EU level of infrastructure planning is transnational planning at the scale of the megaregion. Partnerships between the United States and Canada to build the bridge to the future has the Michigan Department of Transportation building a connection to the Ambassador Bridge, the busiest U.S.-Canada crossing, and connecting 2 interstate highways. The Yangtze River Delta megaregion includes an agreement between major cities to work together on different issues, including transport. the Great Lakes Compact, an agreement among states around the Great Lakes in the northern U.S. to work together to reinvigorate what has been a stalled economy for a number of years now. These are only a few examples. I could give many more. I will stop. I think they make my point. Future population and economic activities are expected to be concentrated in these new and emerging megaregions. This is true in low, medium, and highly developed countries. Megaregions planning offers us the opportunity to create greater connectivity and smooth the connections between towns, cities, regions, and countries. They are capable of responding to challenges presented by the need to manage natural resources, climate change, and transport planning and investment. Megaregions include core areas and their areas of influence. It seems to me this is a very important distinction. The idea that because the connection between our economic centers and the areas that they support ought to be conclusive in terms of our analytic methods and our transport planning techniques, to be able to include those in our projections and expected increase in travel demand. Megaregions offer us a great possibility to develop, I am suggesting, seamless, connected, effective transport. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. If you would like to join me to our talk counter, which I understand is a new thing as part of the International Transport Forum. I quite like it. So it was a very, thank you first of all for the keynote speech, very interesting. And I picked up on actually several ideas. One, certainly, you talk about, what sort of 70% of Americans will live in mega regions by the year. I can't remember the year, but in the not too far future.
Exactly.
And is this something, does transport follow the mega region, those in the making, or do mega regions follow transport and infrastructure already available?
Well, there's no doubt that we connect to our existing infrastructure, but what we're talking about is a phenomenon that has been occurring over a number of years, I think sometimes without our awareness, so that these places are growing closer together. They're becoming one entity in many instances. But our ability to plan is limited, as we all know, by political and sometimes I would say not well-founded restrictions that make it very difficult for us to actually plan in the way in which commodities need to be moved, people need to travel, and regions need to connect.
I mean, how easy is it to identify a mega region in the making? Because obviously planning for transportation, for building infrastructure, we're talking about many, many years in advance, so you have to be pretty sure that this is actually about to happen.
Well, what the map that I showed may look very simple, but it's 5 years in the making. We have been working with our government to define the economic engines in the United States, the 10 regions that I demonstrated. And it comes as a result of doing population forecasts, economic forecasts, looking at freight and commodity movement, air travel, the common natural amenities that regions share that really shape these relationships that many of us are not aware of. But once you map them and study them, it becomes very obvious where they're located. The challenge then is how do you make them work in the way in which they actually operate?
I would like to give you the opportunity in case there is a question already from the floor, which we also would like to encourage. Yes, there's a gentleman here in the second row. Can we have a microphone, please?
Thank you very much. Tony May, World Conference on Transport Research Society. I'd like to congratulate the forum and Catherine, you too, for introducing this theme of the challenge of mega regions. It really is the challenge we already have with mega cities writ large, and one that we have to get right. I suspect that we already know the basic principles of effective transport planning in megacities and mega regions, based particularly on the work that the Forum has done and its predecessor, the European Conference of Ministers of Transport. And those principles are a focus on public transport, on transport-oriented development, on fiscal management, both to control demand and to help invest in infrastructure. And the land use planning which goes with that. And it's a very interesting question, I think, behind some of the things you were saying, as to whether it's better to have a polycentric mega region or a city region style one. But the real challenge, I think, and I'd like to hear your views further on this, is what we can think of as the need for seamless governance, of helping the mega region to bring together the local and the city governments, the state governments, the operators, the providers, in a way which plans transport and land use in an integrated and effective way. And I say this because there's a lot of evidence at the moment that this is the real barrier to effective urban transport planning. Either because national governments don't understand the need for seamless governance at a city level, or in some cases because they see an effective city as a threat to national government. So I'd be very grateful if you could say a little bit more about how you see these different mega regions in different parts of the world developing effective, seamless governance. Thank you.
Thank you.
A very good question, and thank you for it. Let me start with what I think is our largest lever, which is the geography of the mega region. The argument we've been making for a number of years to our Secretary of Transportation and to our President is that these 10 economic engines have to work. That because of their significance in our economy, our linkage in the world economy, there ought to be a system of priorities that says these are responsible for 80% of our GDP, and so they cannot be subjected to the same financing scheme, chance in many instances that they will or will not be funded. So I think that's one level of discussion. The other examples that I gave talked about compacts and alliances that a number of entities have formed initially around projects, but that discussion then leads to a broader discussion, and they discover ways that they might collaborate, which were never a part of the consideration when they sat at the table. And then I'll share something which I think is an age-old truth. I left the university for 4 years when the federal government cut off all financial resources to the city of Atlanta. We violated the Clean Air Act amendments, and they created the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. And at that point in time, the mandate was to restore federal funds and start a regional bus system. And the governor, in his wisdom, gave me a 10-to-1 opportunity. So if local governments gave me $1 to operate transit, I gave them $10 for highway improvements. It worked really well. So I would suggest that finance, and I mentioned that in my talk, is something for us to consider.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I would also like to thank you and give you a bit of time now to take a seat and listen to what the other panelists have to say. Also, for example, about how to better collaborate on an administrative level. And the challenges I would like to look at in particular, first of all, are the challenges referring to the state which hosts this summit right now, the state of Saxony. So, Ms. Ross, thank you very much for the moment. Take a seat, and we'll see you in a bit again.
Thank you, Mara.
So we're making a big leap now across the big pond, return to Europe and indeed to the state of Saxony to learn a bit about the challenges here. So I would like to give you, or would you please give a round of applause to the State Minister for Economic Affairs, Labour and Transport of Saxony in Germany, Mr. Sven Morlock. Would you please come and join me? So we've got loads of microphones here to choose from. Mr. Moll, we heard already something about the big mobility master plan. Mayor Jung mentioned something already along those lines. Perhaps you can sort of fill us in about what's happening there?
Yes, I will give a short introduction, ladies and gentlemen. good morning here in Leipzig about the challenges we have here in Saxony as a part of from East Germany, and the changes they came after the peaceful revolution, which started right here in Leipzig in the Nikolai Church, 100 to 200 meters far from this place. In the time of the Cold War, the north-south transport lines in Europe moved towards the west. And what happened after opening the borders is they are moving backwards to the east, to the old lines. And the second point is the transport increased dramatically. And the task, the challenge was to come to solutions for this both questions, moving backwards to the east and the tremendous more traffic we have. So we have to establish new transport lines between regions, for example, Saxony, Bohemia, Germany, Czech Republic, in a European connection. We have to do this on both, on the street sector and on the railway sector. On the street sector, we already built a motorway from Dresden to Prague to connect two historical cities on the line Berlin, Dresden, Prague, Vienna. And this was possible by a coordinated funding system of federal government in Germany, of European money, of state money, and it was possible because we were in close cooperation with the people in the region. There was a decision of the town parliament of Dresden that they don't want this corridor of this motorway. And there were two parties in this city of Dresden and the Automotive Association which organized a public decision about this project, and the decision was against the voting of the town parliament. They want this connection between Dresden and Prague. Now we have it. We have it because of the people were in favor of it.
Did they give a reason?
The reason is because they want to have this close connection to the motorway, because they want to have the traffic out of the city. If you do it in a far range out around the city, it will not have an impact of the traffic in the city, and the people of Dresden want to have this traffic out of the city. And now we have the challenge, the same situation for the railroad system, which is much more expensive because we have to build a big tunnel through the Ore Mountains. And we need here the cooperation between Saxony, between our partners in the Czech Republic. We need the European Union. We need the funding of the European Union. Then that it's obvious it's not possible to finance a project in about of 3 billion euros out of the budget of Saxony. So we need these partners, and we need the acceptance in the parliament. We need the acceptance from the people. And so we looked for arguments for that. Environmental arguments, because the old railway track through the River Elbe valley is not able to, for these transport necessities. It's wonderful landscape, but no way for high-speed railroad systems. It's a noise situation in this valley and other things. So we find the acceptance from the people there, from the environmentalists, and we have a decision in the parliament. Every member of the parliament was in favor for this project, and it's not self-evident if you have members of a Green Party in the parliament. So that was very, very important to find the acceptance of the people. And if you look for financing, if you look for acceptance for such big projects on the federal, on a European level, it's very important to have the people with you. Mm-hmm. And this is what we organized. Now we are starting preliminary planning for this project, and we hope that we could then put this project on the European and the federal agenda in Germany.
Okay, well, there you mentioned already a lot of players there, and each and every one of them could make life a bit tougher for your plans. If I just, when you mentioned the Green Party, I mean, nothing against the Green Party, but close to environmentalists, and we was just having a conversation this morning, actually, and I think it fits here, bring it up. So they're known to sort of find a bug, literally a bug, in order to prevent a big infrastructure project from happening. We've seen this now for several years with the famous Stuttgart 21 station in Baden-Württemberg. And so you say that everybody is now on the same track and in favor of this project. Could there be perhaps a beetle or some other surely, undoubtedly valuable entity found, which could eventually stall the whole project for several years until a new habitat is found, for example?
We are not in this stage of the project that we look on these small animals, but I think it's the question of the small animals, because the small animal elements like the beetles or other things, we have the Hufeisennase in Dresden, according to a project, the bridge project in Dresden. I think the animals are there, and they will put on the agenda if people are against the project. Yeah. So it's not the question of the animals, it's the question of the people. And so it's very important to have the people with you, then you will not discuss about these kind of animals.
Okay, so as long as the people on your side, you feel safe. What about the demographic factor? I mean, especially the East Germany, since reunification, there was, for the first few years, quite an exodus. It is an aging society. I mean, Germany as a whole is, but especially in this part of the country. Are we talking then still about a growth region? I mean, we just had this beautiful speech there about mega regions. How does that fit in to your planning?
We have different challenges. The project of the railroad system from Dresden to Prague is because of the increase of the transport in Europe from the north to the south. So we need this project for transport, for high-speed railroad systems. But if you look closer to East Germany, to Saxony, you will see that the development is different. We have two growing cities, the city of Leipzig and the city of Dresden, and we have regions, in more rural regions, which face the situation that the population will decline. So we have to give different answers to these different situations. We have to organize transport systems within the cities. The city tunnel Mehr Jung Menschen is one of these projects to organize this, and for us it's very important to come to a transport system, to a road system, which makes it possible that people living in rural areas, in more rural areas, are able to come to their workplaces in the companies in an acceptable time. Only if that is possible, will make sure that the people will not move towards the cities. So we have to face these different challenges. We have to give different answers for different questions in the different regions of Saxony.
Okay. Well, let's look at a completely sort of different challenge in that context. Perhaps again go back across the pond, the big pond, to find out if there are any bugs in the system, perhaps in the United States. I would like to invite Mr. John Horsley, Executive Director, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials of the United States, onto the stage. You can accompany this with applause. Thank you very much. Welcome. Now, I found in your biography that you also served as an Associate Deputy Secretary of Transportation from 1993 to 1999, advocating for intermodal policies, quality of life initiatives, and as a liaison to state and local governments. So you seem to be extremely well connected. And when it comes to quality of life, how do you ensure that? In terms of which transport mode would you prefer?
You collaborate. It's great to be here with Minister Morlock. I work for 50 bosses just like you. None as charming, but my director from Michigan State Department of Transportation was here for the last 3 days, but he had to fly home. He has a day job running transport in Michigan, so he sends his regrets, but it's great to join you. It's my understanding that here in Germany you have 16 states. In the US we have 50. I can't remember exactly how many there are in India, but in many countries around the world, the building blocks of nations are the states, and the building blocks of economies. Interestingly enough, Catherine, and that was a fantastic presentation, Catherine. I really love that mega-regional perspective. But the building blocks of the economy sometimes cross state lines, cross rivers, and we need infrastructure connections to get us there. And what I'd like to do is put on the table 2 examples of collaboration, one between 2 U.S. states to build bridges, and the other, this bridge to the future that Catherine mentioned, between the U.S. and Canada, between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. And it's fascinating how important innovation and collaboration is to making these projects take place in this era of an economic world crisis, very tight purse strings, difficult debt that we've got us into. How can we build the infrastructure that makes possible for one state and one regional economy to unite? The first example is between the states of Indiana and Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky is the home of the UPS megaport, the 9th largest freight hub in the world, air freight. They're the home to bourbon whiskey, one of
which we all know.
The highest quality whiskey in the world, but it's also a home to...
That's arguable.
Arguable.
Yes, I would argue that point.
We'll put Maker's Mark up against anything you've got here. But the 2 states in the metropolitan region of Louisville have known for years, with their growing economy with Ford, GE, and the whiskey manufacturers, they needed more capacity. Finally, a Republican governor of Indiana and a Democratic governor of Kentucky got together and said, show us that we can reduce the cost of these 2 mega bridges from $4 billion down to $2.5, and we can build them. So they did that. And so showing their taxpayers they could save 40% of the project. They're now building the bridges. The one from Kentucky to Indiana will be built with a design-build contract. The one from Indiana to Kentucky will be built with a public-private venture of partnership.
That's how they could reduce the cost.
They could reduce the cost through the innovation in contracting. The second example is this, and Catherine, the one criticism I'd have of your map, I got to work with you on your map, but you cut off the map. Remember your 2 maps. You had one showing state boundaries and U.S.-Canadian boundaries in place. The other, you turned off the lights, and you could see that the mega region of Ontario and Michigan was one. You couldn't see the international boundary. Well, the U.S. government and the state of Michigan are trying to collaborate with the Ontario state government and the nation of Canada to build this bridge to the future. The auto industry in the U.S. and Canada almost died 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's back strong, and they have an integrated industry that crosses both borders, but they need a new bridge. The old bridge is 85 years old and limited in capacity, so Canada is taking the lead. The Transport for Canada is the partner with the Michigan Department of Transportation. This will be a multi-billion-dollar tender with a binational oversight committee, but they're going to build that bridge over the next 5 years, and then the smooth flow of freight between the suppliers in Canada and the manufacturers in the U.S. will be real because of collaboration.
That was very upbeat, and as you mentioned already figures, you say in 5 years, Mr. Morlock, from you we heard that we're sort of now, we start in the planning stage now. We had all the talks with the Czech Republic, and so we're ready to go now. What's the timeline we're looking at here? Because when I remember the chart, especially where the lights were on, it was just dark, and I mean there, Europe certainly looks like one mega region, the whole continent, so collaboration there across borders, I would imagine should be even more important.
Yes, I agree. This cooperation across the borders is very important, and if you look on the small Europe and the several states we have in Europe, it's very important that you have one organization, the European Union, who's thinking about a core network of transportation for railroad and for the road system in Europe. I think it's very important to have this. The main problem of infrastructure building in Germany, in Europe, is a question of the financing. It's a main problem.
And the situation hasn't been better now. It's not better now than it was.
The only chance to put this project on an agenda is to do it with the funding, with the co-funding of the European Union. If we speak about the 3 billion euros project, it's not possible without them. But we need the national co-financing, and the national budget of the transport minister is too small to fulfill all the wishes of the 16 states of Germany. So it's a kind of dealing. So you have to work for political majorities. We do this if we work close together with the people from the Czech Republic. We do this if we use European money for preliminary planning to put this project on the agenda. And for us, it's now very important just to anchor this, to bring this project in the European core network. Then only if it's in, we have the possibility for the European funding. So first step is to bring that project in the European transport network system. And if it's in, then we have to talk with the federal level and the European level about the funding. And to be honest, I'm sure that we will not start with digging before 10 years. So it will really take a long time. But it's a situation like transport systems has to be constructed, it has to be planned in mega regions, because it's very difficult to organize it. We had one good chance in the east part of Germany after the reunification, because the federal government decided to change the law for these planning processes, to make these planning processes quicker, to come to quicker decision. That helped very much in the last 20 years. But to be honest, to make such projects in these days, it takes a very long time. For me, it's too long, but we have to accept this because of the funding situation we have.
Okay. So there's a huge difference in terms of the time it takes to get all players involved. When I think of the European Union, there's so many different interests at stake. Is it comparable to the United States? I mean, he didn't mention public-private partnerships, for example. I mean, it's a very different system, and it seems to be working faster.
Both of the projects I mentioned have been 10 years in the planning at least. The breakthrough that's going to make the financing of these 3 bridges possible is not to wait anymore for national funding, but to use toll financing to open the door to a viable regional project where the users will pay directly for the use of the facility and make it financially viable. Of course, a major portion of the Kentucky-Indiana bridge will depend on some federal cash flow, and that's my job in Washington to make sure that those two states get their share of the legislation that's pending right now. But what we're finding in the U.S., we can't wait for tax revenue to fund major bridges, major highway, major transit and rail projects. If we can find direct funding through tolling, that seems to work.
Now, that's been a big discussion in Germany as well, with tolls for roads, especially as it's a transit country, right at the heart of Europe.
We have this toll system for the lorries on our roads in Germany, but it's, I think, in the population not acceptable to do this for all the vehicles we have. But we have some projects, some street projects, which are financed by the users, which are toll financed. And I think this kind of financing, user financing, will become more and more important also in Germany. The problem we have on the railroad system is that with the German, with the Deutsche Bahn, we have only one carrier who will use probably this system. And if you have only one carrier using a private financed railroad system, it's very difficult because you have no competition. So you can use this if you have a lot of users, maybe on the streets, but it's very difficult to use this kind of financing if you have probably one or two users on the railroad system.
Okay, well, it's a national carrier, so what stops the major stakeholder to allow more competition? I mean, there are certain hurdles for others to get into the market, right? They don't make the hurdles themselves.
In fact, we have this competition. We have this in Germany, we have this in Europe, but if you look on the details, you don't have these competitions because we have national regulations because of the trains, because of the security system. So it's not a really competition we have, a really trans-European competition. If we would have this competition, I think it will be much better to organize private money for these projects.
Okay. I have one more question for you, Mr. Horsley, because we've seen on this chart also that you have these mega regions on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and over to Canada, across. In between, in a few years from now, it looks pretty empty, and the United States already is a huge country. What does this mean infrastructure-wise? I mean, what are you planning there? How do these regions in between the states, how do they feel about it? Are they left out, or are they still connected?
Well, that's the challenge. Much of the national and international discussion focuses on the mega regions and the mega cities. But I represent all 50 states, and many of those states are rural, and the people who live in those states and the governors of those states and the transportation ministers from those states think they're pretty important as well. So the challenge is to find a system of planning, project execution, and economic expansion that opens the door for opportunity for all the states. And for the metropolitan areas that are booming, and we have those, especially in the South, Atlanta and the Piedmont, Florida, Texas, Arizona, places like that, they're doing fine. They have the means to expand in the toll of viability. But in the Mountain West, in the Northeast, and some of our smaller states, that's the challenge for the moment. And we have a political dialogue going on here very similar to that in the EU, austerity versus opportunity. And those who want to cut spending don't understand the difference between spending and investment in infrastructure that enables a strong, positive future. And we'll get through this, but for the next couple of years, we're having a tough time.
Okay. Well, Mr. Horsley, Mr. Morlock, thank you very much. For the time being, you will join us again for the big session, which is coming up in about 15 minutes from now, where I would like to invite you all also to ask your questions. But thank you very much. It was very interesting for now. Thank you. We turn to Asia now. We all know Asia, big growing market with the biggest emerging economies, China and India. And we have a representative from India here amongst us. His name is Manoj Singh, Transport Advisor, Planning Commission of the Government of Delhi. And I would like to invite him to join me here on the stage. Mr. Singh. Thank you. Very good. So welcome, good to have you here. I've been to India only once so far. I remember, I liked it a lot, but I also remember it as being somewhat chaotic when it comes to street traffic, and I didn't have the chance to use public transport yet. But I do understand that India is sort of in the last few years certainly opening up in terms of trade relations, and also wants to open up more trade to East and Southeast Asia, and for that you need more connectivity with your neighbors. What exactly have you got planned there?
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, it works. Should be working.
Yeah. Yes, I think you've touched the right chord, and before that we heard the issue of governance, and I would like to bring in another issue, which is geopolitics. geopolitics can come in the way of seamlessness. And we have talked about seamlessness all these days. The opposite of seamlessness is fragmentation. And that's exactly what happened on the Indian subcontinent 60 years back, when one country, that is India, and that comprised Bangladesh, what is presently India, Pakistan, into 3 different countries, essentially 2 different countries. In fact, Pakistan and Bangladesh were one, and India was the other. And that created nearly 8,000 kilometers of new borders. And if you have new borders, then the inevitable consequence of that is the dislocation, the disunification of transport links. And we are bearing the burden of that history even now. So therefore, it is very difficult for us. For example, if we now look towards the east, let's take the case of Bangladesh, for example. It's a country of around 150 million, and the way it is located is it's almost sandwiched between the state of West Bengal on one side and the northeastern states, the 7 sisters as we call it in India, on the other. And if you want to go, for example, from the city of Calcutta, or Kolkata as it is now called, to one of these cities, let's say the capital of Tripura, which is on the other side of Bangladesh, you have to actually traverse the whole, go up like this and then come down, and that's 1,800 kilometers. But if you went through Bangladesh, this distance will come down to 600 kilometers. Now that's the kind of difference it can make if we have the transit through Bangladesh starting from this. And that is what we have been trying to do for the past so many years. But geopolitics, as I mentioned, comes in the way. Fortunately now, the situation has improved. The geopolitical situation is much more favorable. And we are now in a very advanced stage where we can connect the missing link between this city of Agartala, the capital of Tripura, and Dhaka. So now we can actually go over from this city of Calcutta to Agartala through the 600 kilometers. I think in the future this can happen.
How is the collaboration there? I mean, for many, many years, obviously, there was a huge political issue between India and Bangladesh, then being still part of Pakistan. And it was like East Pakistan, called them Bangladesh on its own, but still, there was a lot of political friction there. So how did you start, bit by bit, to sort of opening up to this connectivity? And also, who was in charge of what?
That's a good question. Actually, what we had going for us was the strong cultural links. You see, Bangladesh is nothing but East Bengal. And the west part of Bengal is what is the Bengal in India is the West Bengal. And these are like Siamese twins, I would say. I mean, culturally, they are, you have the same icons. For example, Rabindranath Tagore rings a bell. This author, the first Nobel Prize winner from India, for example, he probably is the only author in the world the poet who wrote the national anthems of both these countries. So, and if you look at the dress, if you look at the food, these are absolutely similar. So we had a very strong cultural bedrock, and we just needed to work on this. So who does what essentially actually is the people-to-people contact, which essentially then force the geopolitics in a certain direction. And this happened in this case also. And therefore, after that, the national governments have to follow. So I would say that is the culture which starts and this we see, of course, what better place to see this than Germany.
Well, India is known for its red tape, and if you say that the culture is very similar in Bangladesh, I would imagine that red tape is also there in abundance. If you take us just through it, I mean, we've just heard from Mr. Horsley also about the conversations and the years it took to agree across administrative levels, also across the border. What would you say was the biggest hurdle in getting this project up and running?
Red tape, yes. We are famous for red tape. For example, on the World Bank's index for ease of doing business, India doesn't top the list. We all know that. But I think here it was more than red tape. I mean, here it was more sort of politics and that kind of leadership, which was coming in the way. And since the change of regime in Bangladesh, the things have become much more favorable. So I would say that rather than the red tape here standing in the way. But nevertheless, to give you an example, I mean, in terms of the customs facilitation, for example, you know, you are in Europe living in an integration nirvana, I would say, you know, the heaven of integration. A container comes down at the port of Rotterdam and it can seamlessly travel to, let's say, the south of Italy or wherever it wants to do. But imagine the situation where suppose you know, Bangladesh has one port, the port of Chittagong, which is a very congested port. And on this side, you have the port of Kolkata and Haldia. If a container originating in India had to go over to Bangladesh, you know, some not less than 350 signatures would be required. And some 2 days would be required in processing this transaction. I mean, this, of course, I'm talking a few years back. Now things are on the improve, and we have to move in the direction of, you know, something what, of course, it's not a custom union. European Union is as a custom union. You have one customs. We don't have a custom union. We are not moving in that direction as of yet. But certainly in the area of facilitation of these documentation, we are moving ahead in that direction.
Okay. Mr. Singh, you stay here with me because I would like to invite our last but not least panelist, Mr. Alain Flanche. He's the Secretary General of the International Association of Public Transport. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Flanche. And you also told me yesterday that, I mean, cross-border connectivity is not such a huge issue in Belgium, but there is another very interesting topic we can talk about. I don't know if Brussels and the surroundings already applies for the name of a mega region, but it certainly is embedded in a big region around. And from 2000 to 2011, you led the Société des Transports Intercommunaux de Brussels, very nice, STIB, through an in-depth cultural change. I would like to know exactly what you were doing, what you found when you started and what you were doing, because since then, the ridership increased by more than 100%.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain this. But, you know, trans-border issue indeed in public transport are rare. If you look in Europe, a city like Basel or a city like Geneva would be involved in some cross-border issues, and it works pretty fine, I guess, through collaboration between the various partners. But using the Brussels case was, for me, a bad example, I would say. It's the thing you shouldn't do. Maybe some of you know a little bit about the geography of Belgium, but this tiny country was split in 3 parts 20 years ago. That's what they call regionalization. So in the north you have Flanders, in the south you have Wallonia, and in the middle you have Brussels surrounded by the Flemish region. Now, obviously, from an economic viewpoint or from a transport viewpoint, this city of Brussels, which is the capital of Europe, is isolated within the Flemish region, although people commute every day. More than 350 people are coming every day to the city. And for, you know, customers of public transport, they don't care about the boundaries. But unfortunately, those institutional boundaries are making life extremely difficult. And for 20 years now that the regionalization has been made, the collaboration between the various states and between the various operators is very minimal. And so although I certainly greet and appreciate the idea that collaboration is of the essence for those mega regions, I'm afraid it's not enough, because goodwill people exist. I have been trying to make deals with all my partners, didn't want to, because they want to look at their feet. Maybe it was part of the historical reason, but basically I think we should lean towards governance, because it's really setting up some sort of institution. I'm not that much for structure, But I think from time to time, if you have a structure whereby the 3G region would delegate some competence to an organizing authority, a transport authority, which would have competence over a region of 40 kilometers around Brussels and including Brussels, that would certainly make it much more easy. And that has to be done. And if you know how it works in Germany, where you have the Verkehrsverbund and things of that sort, that is a good example of what should be done. But, you know, you go to Barcelona, you go to Madrid, you go to Paris, this sort of community of transport must exist. And if I could give, as UITP Secretary General, one advice to the people who do not have this type of structure, they should contemplate to set up this sort of structure.
How did you handle the situation? Because, I mean, as we all know, the government of Belgium, for a long time, there was a huge unclarity, huge uncertainty, what's happening, who is doing what, who is in charge. How do you plan in public transport or in any kind of transport then, as we mentioned earlier? I mean, these are long-term investments. It must have been, you were somewhere up in the air there, I presume.
Yeah, to some extent, this experience was also interesting because it means that a country can work without a government. And that's obviously...
Well, other countries should listen very carefully to that, yeah.
But besides this, one good part of this federal state of Belgium is that you have a government on the local level, on the Flemish level, Brussels level, the Walloon level, and they had a government, while on the federal level we didn't have a government. Now, obviously, there must be relations between the federal government and the local government. And there's money on federal level, and we wait. And there are projects like, you know, big project like building a new metro line, where the local money is not good enough or not enough, where we needed federal government. Those projects have been stalled. And it's very unfortunate because, as you mentioned earlier, in 10 years we were able to double the ridership of our system. And so today we have something like a 50% market share in the city of Brussels. But we know this is going to double again in the next 15 years. And though in the year 2000 all cars were not empty, but were not very full, now they are totally saturated. So we need new material, we need new trains, we need new buses, we need new tunnels, and all this required time. We heard about a 10-year planning. If you decide today just to launch the idea of a new tunnel, it's going to take you 10 years before having it. And so if the government is slow, and you know that's one of the issues all over the world, time to market is not really an issue in the mind of our politician, because tomorrow is another day. We in the transport business, we are not that way. We know it takes time. We know the administrative procedure is very long. And so time is of the essence, and because obviously we'll be blamed if 10 years from now the trains are not there and are full, and then the citizen would say public transport is no alternative. So if you really want public transport to be an alternative within cities, and we all know there is no other option than increasing the share of public transport, biking and all this soft mode, because our cities are short enough in terms of surface. There is no way we can pile up again cars there. So we need to take the decision fast, now. And besides the crisis, I think we should make a call to Europe, to all the national politicians, to local politicians, please decide, make sound decisions, not just on the corner of a table. Listen to the expert and go.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Just finally, a question for Mr. Singh and perhaps Mr. Floch. I would like to hear your opinion there. I mean, we're talking about emerging markets, and that also implies that it's almost like a sort of a pioneering spirit. A lot of things are being done, you know, starting from scratch, which can be a very daunting task, but which also can offer a lot of opportunities. And Ms. Ross mentioned in her keynote speech also the corridor Delhi-Mumbai, which is sort of growing at these mega regions. You have Chennai also as a mega city there. So how do you base your decisions on improving infrastructure and building transport modes? Is that decision driven by the needs of the citizens or the needs of trade and commerce?
See, there is infrastructure deficit. And if I hear that, you know, in Europe you have to build tunnels, you have to build rail, you have to build all those things, then imagine how much building we have to do in Asia. and in countries like India and all these parts of the country, because there is deficit. So it's driven by both. It's driven by the requirements of the trade and commerce, and it's driven by the passenger, the mobility, the requirements of the people. So you mentioned, for example, this Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. I think it's a very ambitious project that we are taking, and the core of this project is a dedicated freight railway corridor, which is worth around $20 billion, which we hope to bring it in the next 5 years. So this is a dedicated corridor starting from the port on the western city of Mumbai, which is India's largest container port, and taking it to the hinterland in north part of India in Delhi. And we hope that with this, around this corridor, we are trying to build this industrial complex, again, which is in the various states through which this 1,500 kilometers or so corridor passes. So the idea is to, along with regeneration of the whole economy, or actually of when the corridor passes through that. This is on the trade side, but look at our cities. I mean, Delhi today is 18 million. It is slated to become second largest in terms of population in 20 years' time after Tokyo. It will have 30 million plus. So we have the metro, Delhi metro, and metros are coming up in Chennai, Mumbai, Bangalore, and many smaller cities like Jaipur, Chandigarh, and you know, these wannabes these are at the moment, they want to break into the big league. They are also planning the metros. The bus systems, and Ahmedabad has a well-functioning BRT. Delhi tried one, was not very successful. So we are trying all sorts of things. And I think in this crucible of experimentation, some things will work, some things won't. But hopefully we will emerge.
Is there any advice you could give, Mr. Floss, from the European perspective?
I think we have developed in Europe, and I know it's used also in India, many tools to support the decision to build new infrastructure. At the beginning, it was basically lying on the idea that if you build a new metro system, it will go faster, will transport many people. But there are other considerations that needs to be accounted in those cost and benefit analysis. And things which are more political or economical are just a list of things, but you want to improve economic productivity. That's obviously something you may want to. The quality of the urban environment, the social inclusion. You want some borough to be connected, because if they're not connected, they live a poor life. You want to contribute to a healthier society, because you think that less accident, like fatalities on the road, more healthy air. Just the quality of the air is so important now today in our regions here. Also to the personal safety of people. So there are plenty of consideration. The issue always is that when you want to convince a political world that you need to make that decision, they is kind of overwhelmed by all the data you're coming with. So you have to be very pedagogic and try to explain in simple words, these are the major benefits of this huge analysis. Generally, it's this thick type of document, so that they immediately feel the major issue at stake. And that's part of our job.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Floss. Mr. Singh, you now have the pleasure of remaining here on the stage with me, because we're now being joined by the other three panelists we've already met, Mr. Horsley, Mr. Morlock, and Ms. Ross. If you would come and join us now for the last round, which now I hope will also get a lot of interventions from your side, from the floor. All I need is your raised hand. It's very bright up here, so please don't be shy. Give me a clear raised hand. There is already a gentleman over there, while the microphone is on its way to you. Keep your hand up so we find you, please. Yeah. I would just like to throw one question into the round, because obviously we're talking about connectivity across borders, so we're talking about collaboration across administrative levels, we talk about politicians that need to be convinced to do the right thing, and so forth. But for me, I mean, we're all, as we're standing here, we live in democracy, so even politicians have to answer eventually on election day to the public. So how do you convince them to make the best choices? By appealing to their sense of what the public needs? By appealing to what industry needs, which also, of course, is part of the public. I mean, who is the best advocate?
Well, first I want to compliment Alain on the suggestion that after seeing the Belgian government shut down for 2 years, that may be an international solution. When I get home, I'm going to explore that. The president has been campaigning on a campaign of "we can't wait" for Congress to get its act together. Maybe we'll shut them down for a couple of years. One of the things that I've noticed about our politicians, and I suspect it's the same in India, Germany, and all over Europe, is they want a better future for their children, for their grandchildren, and they're looking, how do you rebuild the economic future, regardless of the region? And one of the things, Catherine, getting back to your map of the mega regions within the U.S., and then seeing that with the lights out and seeing the U.S., Canadian, and Mexican area, that's the North America NAFTA agreement area. When we see India with a population of 1.4 billion, a mega region, and we see the EU with nearly 450 million people, and the U.S. alone 300. But if we link our economy with those of Canada and Mexico, then we have the scale of competitiveness as we're looking at trade flows and efficiency and productivity increases. That's the rethinking that I think our politicians need to grasp, that if we're going to advance the potential of a national economy, collaboration with nearby, creating a viable critical mass to compete in the future, at least in our part of the world, Catherine, it's going to take not only the Piedmont collaborating with Florida and the Northeast, but it's the entire U.S., Canada, and Mexico then positioning itself to compete with the EU and India.
Okay.
Very quickly, in my experience, one of the things that I have observed is that politicians like company. So many times I would say to one of our representatives, "Did you know Representative Johnson is going to support this?" And he would say, "Oh, really?" And I would identify 2 or 3 others. And after I convinced him he was not alone, he or she would be quite willing to be a sponsor, if not the person that presented the legislation, they would certainly sign on to it. So there is that opportunity as well.
Okay. Any more comments on that particular point?
The best advocate for new transport system, for new transport project are the people. There's no new transport project only with advantages. Every new project has disadvantages. We have to be honest to see that there are disadvantages. And it's important what is the view of the people. If they look at the advantages and disadvantages. And if the people see a lot of more advantages, then they will be in favor of the project. And it depends on the situation. Here in Saxony, in East Germany, we have a situation with an unemployment rate about little more than 10%. And the unemployment rate here in the region were by 20% 10 years ago. In the south of Germany, Baden-Württemberg, for example, the rate is about 4%. So the situation of the people is different. So the acceptance of the people for disadvantages to go forward, to close the gap to the western parts of Germany, for example, is much bigger than you mentioned that project in Stuttgart 21, the new main station, in this situation. So it's very important to explain people what are the benefits for the project, then you have the people behind you, and then you have the acceptance for the project.
I guess I could add something in this respect, sorry.
No,
it's just that, first of all, it's true, and that's why we need some local foundation, because you know there are people much better than the federal governments. That's certainly one of the virtues of this decentralization system. But at the same time, what needs to be done is building alliances. Because once you have allies, they are promoting your own project. So basically you find the people, of course, but you can find the business people that are different. If you look at London, the congestion charge, it was repeated yesterday by Peter Hendy. It was brought up by the business community. And once you have the business community with you, especially in England, it works better. And it was quite a success because of this. And I really think that we need champions like the Minister of Transport for a project. He must be the champion, he must have the voice together with the alliance around him, taking the word also on the project. And this is really an expertise to build big infrastructure project.
That's exactly why we're talking about it. It is really a field of expertise. So, Mr. Singh, you also wanted to comment.
Well, in India, one thing going is the demographic dividend, as we call it in India, because we have young people. Most of the population is young, they are restless, they want change, they want positive change, and that's what is driving the politicians, because ultimately they have to face the elections every 5 years. So I think the trend is that in India, it's a politician who is promising maximum investment, maximum development, and delivers it also. In fact, it is possible for him to beat the incumbency problem. You see, he can get re-elected. We have seen that happening in a couple of states recently. So that's what happens in India.
Okay, then I would like to thank you very much for the patience, the gentleman in the fourth row, if I see this correctly. Your question, please.
Thank you. I'm from the International Federation of Pedestrians. So go from the big to the small. Municipalities are normally planning to get people to their centers, but they will not help or not plan to get people to centers in other municipalities. And that, of course, gives partly a lack of pedestrian planning. And I was just listening to the mayor of Leipzig saying that he was working now within the mobility plan for a cyclist plan, but not for a pedestrian plan. Should regions and state governments help municipalities to do this planning to get a real door-to-door, a seamless transport?
Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you for bringing that question to the floor. This idea, in America, we're paying a great deal of attention now to a concept of complete streets, which talks about a shared right-of-way that would integrate pedestrians, bicycle alternatives. Now, we know for safety reasons and others that doesn't work in every place, but I think it begins to speak to part of your question. One of the issues that I attempted to reference in my comments had to do with these centers and surrounding areas. There's a reciprocity, I am convinced, that has to provide some opportunity, some benefit for as many places as possible, and certainly places that are not immediately in that core or major economic center. That is a point, that distinction is a point of great discussion in our country now with those of us leading this research. There's a camp that says every town on its own bottom in mega regions and major cities should only worry about the interests of major cities. I reject that and think that is not something that we can do. But see, pedestrianism and the ability to walk at local levels is very much a part of the seamless transport.
But let me draw a distinction between decisions that should be made by the mayor and the government of Leipzig, or even in coordination with the state. We're having a national debate in the U.S. right now of how do we fund transportation at all levels, city and county, state and federal. And what I don't think works is for advocacy groups like the Pedestrian Alliance, who cannot persuade a city to fund pedestrian accessibility, to then leapfrog the city or the county, go to the state, and failing that, because they don't have the resources, then go to Congress and mandate that states fund what the city and county don't have the means to fund. Having been a county official myself for 20 years, I would encourage your Pedestrian Alliance to work at the local level where these types of opportunities should be created, rather than force states to do what cities and counties don't have the means to do.
Okay, Mr. Morlock was nodding, so I presume it's the same procedure here in Germany. It's what you would advise.
It's the same procedure in Germany. I think these pedestrian aspects should be dealt on the very local level in the cities with the funding support of state or federal level. And we have always these conflicts, and Mr. Jung, we have these conflicts even in the city of Leipzig when we are discussing how on which lines, on which streets should be cycling allowed in the pedestrian areas. That's the fact, the discussion we have in the city, because it's sometimes different for it's dangerous for the pedestrian if the bicycle movers are riding through the city. So we have to solve this conflict, but these conflicts can only be solved on the very local level and not on a state or federal level.
Okay. Do we have another question? There's a gentleman in the third row. So it should be easy to pass the microphone on, unless it's disappeared already. No, it's on its way. It's on its way.
Thank you very much. Manfred Neun, I'm president of the European Cyclists Federation, and I like this discussion very, very, very much. We know, as a matter of fact, the federal level is responsible or feels responsible for all the long-distance transportations. And all the tiny window things are then placed on the local level. On the first day, in the last mile session, Rethinking Last Mile, I was raising up the thesis that if we really like seamless transport, we need a fair competition between all the different modes of transport. So in fact, that means if we not establish also this fair competition on the national level, on the federal level, we never will achieve in a fair competition between all the different means. And that means we will not achieve in a fair competition, especially to realize more cycling and more walking. So this is what I'm asking for, that also the national level will feel responsible for those things. Or let it say in another figure, the long-distance transportation means this is what we call the passive mobility, the energy-driven mobility. And the tiny window things, this is the active mobility by people, walking and cycling. And I think we have to use both. So I am asking for more responsibility also on the national level for all together to come to a fair competition and in total, in fact, to come to seamless transport. Thank you very much.
Okay, but I don't think there's a disagreement, is there? To have that all pedestrians and all different various kinds of modes have a voice on a federal level as well. Eventually it would reach the federal level, hopefully.
Yes, it reaches the federal level, but it's very difficult if you try to make decisions on the federal level and to use funding to move states or cities in a special direction. It's very complicated because in a local situation, the federal goals maybe are not on this local agenda. We have one example in Germany. The decision was we want to strengthen the public transport system in our cities by giving these public transport system their own lines so that they can move faster in our cities. So we created a funding conflict. We have this here in Leipzig, we have it in Dresden, because if you give them their own lines, then it's a question what should be, what is the space for the bicycles, what is the space for the pedestrian, what is this for the car. So these discussions are very local. We have this here in Leipzig, Mr. Jung, in the Karl-Liebknecht-Straße. We have it in the Königsbrücker Straße in Dresden. So if you try to use these things on a federal level, you create conflicts on the very local level. And I think at the end, the decision have to be made in the local level because the federal guidelines are too far from the needs in the local system.
Okay.
It sounds to me like your European bicycle advocates are very similar to those we have in the U.S. at the national level. They create a national alliance to beat Congress into submission, so they'll then force the states to force our cities and counties to do what the states and cities and counties should do on their own, according to the politics and the dollar availability. And that's where we disagree. There are functions that really should be decided locally, and there are national connectivity or regional connectivity things that should be funded at the state and federal level. And we support complete streets. We support bicycles and pedestrian movement as a vital component of how we move folks everywhere in the world. But who should be funding it? Local.
Okay.
Let me add a bit to John's comments. Currently, in the state of Georgia, we have an upcoming opportunity to vote in July. We've divided our state into 12 districts with the option to tax themselves 1 cent additional. Out of that, 75% would go to the region to fund regionally significant projects. 25% would be at the discretion of local areas. So it seems to me this responds very nicely to the request in terms of you certainly can have locally significant projects in a regional plan, and you certainly can have resources and the opportunity to decide what those projects are at a local level and to fund them.
Okay, I was just about to say that on this issue we won't see eye to eye, but you just sort of made it round the corner here. I think I've seen several. Wonderful. Let's start with this lady here in the second row, please.
Hi, I'm Sue Zielinski from SMART at the University of Michigan. And we've had a lot of great dialogue about governance and how different policies are going to move us forward in this kind of new world of megacity regions. And what I'm interested in from you also is what's the new configuration that's going to allow private sector involvement, participation, even leadership in some of the innovation that we need in this area, in this seamlessness. And the reason I say is because there are these new sort of startups and new technologies and services and designs and products, but also big companies rethinking themselves, whether they're manufacturing or IT companies, saying, how do we play a role in seamless transportation? And so I'm interested in, beyond public-private partnership, what are the kinds of forms of perhaps public-private innovation that's going to emerge? And what are some of the platforms and levers that are going to allow and encourage and incent the kinds of collaboration that you're talking about?
Let me offer first an example and then a more specific answer to your question. I sit on the board of directors of the Auto Club Group, which is a AAA organization. Recently it merged between a small auto club in the South, 2 states, with a larger auto club in Michigan, which covers 12 states. And that merger required significant consideration, given that there was banking holdings in one instance and car repair services and trip planning. So a different set of services. And we've had a lot of discussion about what are the things that you do first, where are those first opportunities in terms of the important things on which you could hang a structure of some sort. And they turned out to be 3 things. One is finance. You have to get that right. Good information, and then customer service. So it seems to me if you start there as a base and then ask yourself, what are the structures we can overlay, particularly at the outset, is very important, I think. It can change as we learn better how to do it. And I think it can take a number of different shapes and forms. It ought to reflect the goals and objectives of the entities who are partners, clearly, the things that they can agree on. The 3 areas that I've identified, I think, are very important things to agree on at the outset. So it seems to be working. This is these are not private sector. But I still think it has a significant implication for how we ought to move forward. So I think you'll see great variation. And I think that's a good thing, that it's flexible enough to reflect the preferences, the living wishes, and the conditions of those entities that are part of it.
Mr. Flausch.
Maybe on this regarding information, you know, one of the problems of public transport compared to the car, that in your car you don't think when you jump into your car, even if 2 miles from there you're stuck in a traffic jam. Whereas, public transport is something, especially when you use these buses, you never know where you go, where you have to stop and so on. So you have to make it accessible and easy to understand. Now, information, of course, is of the essence in this respect. And that's all the debate about open access to information. We have a lot of information for the passenger, but we are not expert in building Android standard or other iPhone or things of that sort. So I think we should work on opening access to the information. Good quality information need to be provided, pretty well formatted, and then the market will do its job. There will very smart people innovating on this, and they will provide applications, apps like we use every day, which will be using those data and making public transport attractive and easy to access. That's the whole issue.
Okay, just a second. I wanted to, Mr. Singh wanted to say something first. Then it's over to you, Mr. Horsley.
Yes, I think the private players have a big role, and the role is essentially to cover the seams. Essentially, come and close the seams. I'll give you an example. In fact, I was quite surprised. I read this in Time magazine 3 weeks before. In India, in the cities like Bangalore, etc., you have these the techies. They have to go home every Friday evening, and one such guy, he found that he was not getting any bus. He wanted to go to Bangalore, from Bangalore to a city around 300 kilometers. So what he did is that, we have the state road transport undertakings which supply the buses on the state models. So essentially, Karnataka will not talk to Tamil Nadu, will not talk to Andhra Pradesh, will not talk to Kerala, and so on. These 4 southern states, for example. So this guy, what he's developed is called an application called the Red Bus, and here he's able to find out the seats from the various bus corporations, and you can register yourself and find a ticket. So that's a solution which he found out. And things like this, essentially we in the government should actually step 2 steps backward, give the information in the public domain, and as you mentioned, then leave for the innovations to just take place.
Sue, I have two examples for you, one macro, one micro. Microsoft, based in Redmond, Washington, just east of Seattle, is a huge corporation with thousands of employees, and they have found they couldn't rely on King County Metro to provide transit. And so they've formed a jitney bus service of their own for their own employees, and it avoids the 13C labor complications. So Boeing, because they're of a scale, they can provide convenient service that increases productivity and flexibility for Microsoft employees. In Portland, Maine, there's a social service initiative where churches are a source of information on individuals who are willing to give grandma a ride. So if you have a grandmother in Portland, Maine, and you're living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and you can't get up there to give grandma a ride, but you can't afford to fund a taxi or public transit, you can offer to offset some of the cost of individuals who are willing to give grandma a ride, and they get their gas tank filled once a week for offering that volunteer service.
John, everyone would give grandma a ride.
I've just noticed that we're actually, we have one question over there, and then I have time for 2 more, and I think then we will have to call it a day. So the gentleman requests a microphone, sits in the 2nd row. There we are. Please.
I think the best thing would have been to keep the grandmother with the family rather than looking for a taxi. Having said that, we have been talking of mega cities, mega trends, etc. I think a time has come when the pace of urbanization should be muffled, which means that we should keep more people in the rural areas, provide job opportunities to them and the economic activities over there. It is always nice to have words like mega, and there is a virtue in understatement. In the Second World War, the Britishers produced the best of the fighters and called them the mosquitoes. The second point, we have been talking of the connections. We need to take into consideration the imperatives of environmental degradation. Ever since the man emerged on this earth, the conditions under which he has moved has largely been shaped by the ease with which he is able to move himself with goods. But if invention of wheel was the precursor of civilization, I'm afraid the environmental degradation caused by transport is also its original sin. So while planning these corridors, we should have the intermodal choices, which are far more benign to the environment, which use much less energy, which use much less land resources also. Which brings me the concept of the rail transport. I have heard with great interest and respect people talking about the rail transport, but apparently it appeared to me a lot of lip service. The third point, as the world grows, and considering the shortages of the fossil fuels for the transport sector, the regional networks will be far more important. And I'm glad Mr. Singh made an important contribution to this discourse, because ultimately it is the regional networks which will benefit in terms of trade. I've heard the gentleman talking that they wish to develop a critical mass, that is between USA, America, and Canada, as a counterpoint to 1.4 billion people in India, a similar number in China. Now, this particular mindset, I'm afraid, will not going to work into the future. One, the epicenter of trade is already shifting from the west to the east. But having shift taking place over there, it's important that the regional networks are developed. And here there will be a singular contribution made by the discourse over here if we leave stress on these points. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this contribution. So, the mega region isn't the be-all and end-all necessarily.
Absolutely not, and nor was it, I hope, presented in that way. I think it has serious challenges, but of course, we have serious challenges if we totally ignore the mega region, which we have to some extent mostly done to this point. So there is no disagreement there. I think there are a lot of issues that were raised in the question, and there are a lot of assumptions. I guess what resonated most with me is this requirement that we manage our natural resources, that environmental degradation has to be something we're always cognizant of, and that we ask our transport policy to be respectful and supportive of that and to be sustainable so that we in fact have it to pass along to future generations.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid at this moment I will have to make already the transition to our last intervention from the floor, which I will actually pick. I need a specific gentleman. He happens to be the chief economist of the International Transport Forum, Mr. Kurt van Dender, because this is almost already a wrap and will also conclude, obviously, this year's International Transport Forum, but the next one will focus on the theme of funding. And obviously finance has played quite a big role, I think, in our discussion as well, but I would like to hear it from Mr. van Dender, in a way, on behalf of all of you here. Did we miss out any very important point in that respect?
Thank you for giving me the floor for a couple of minutes. No, I don't think you missed out on any important points. There were actually far too many for me to even try to summarize at this point, so I will not try to do that. We will try to summarize later and provide you with feedback on this debate. Just a couple of reflections in 1 or 2 minutes. We look for connectivity, we strive for connectivity, seamless transport between all kinds of places, between countries, between states, within mega regions, within big cities. We look for connections between all these places, seamless transport. The common problem that appeared in all your presentations is that the economic and the social geography that determines mobility policy and mobility needs that is relevant to mobility, that this geography differs from jurisdictional geography. That problem must be overcome. You need to cooperate, you need to integrate. We've heard it actually in debates yesterday and the day before in different guises. You need integration and you need cooperation to get good mobility policy. The extra twist here is you need this cooperation and integration to get good mobility policy and good mobility in the right places. So that's what was emphasized, I think, in your contributions. Now, cooperation, how can you get there? Well, you need a deal that's acceptable to everyone involved. How do you get such a deal? Well, you need a good project, a project that has more benefits than it has costs. That's what you have to start from. That's where you have to start from, but it is not enough. Good projects are not automatically adopted, precisely because all the people involved need to get some share of the cake. You need to find a distribution of benefits that allows everyone to enter into the deal. And the problem is with the fragmentation that we see in jurisdictions, in competencies, is that the starting point for the negotiations is often a very long ways away from a solution that is acceptable to everyone. That kind of is a factor which at least partly explains, I think, the very lengthy processes that several of you referred to. You need a lot of time to get to a solution that works for everyone. It's a perennial problem. It's not going to go away. We should not pretend that it is going to go away, but we can do something. We can do something. What have I heard from you that we can do? We need leadership, I have heard. We need strong institutions. Leadership and strong institutions will help us integrate better and cooperate better. An important point in the keynote, for strong institutions to be possible, they have to be legitimate. And for that, you need regional identities. I think this was a very important point that I picked up there. We need strong institutions. If we have those, why are they so important? Well, transport policy, transport, long life cycles, longer than political cycles, certainly longer than annual budget cycles. So we need a long-term horizon in transport policy making, and that's what these strong institutions help us establish. They help us get to that. If we have a long-run vision, a long-run support in institutions, what does that allow us to do? It was mentioned it helps us get to more balanced mobility. More balanced mobility, we have in a lot of cases in the past been relying on cars a bit too much, and I think this is partly an institutional issue. The steering that you need to get to more balanced mobility has sometimes been a little bit too weak. So strong institutions, long-run visions help us move toward more balanced mobility, more seamless and more connected transport. We've been talking about that. That's very important. I think also that a long-run vision and strong institutions will help us get easier access to funding. I said easier, I did not say easy. It is not going to be easy, we all know that. It's not going to be easy in the foreseeable future to get funded what we like to see funded. But strong institutions help, we can commit, we can provide clarity, we can have clear plans. All of this helps us attract not only private funding, but also public funding. So this is something that we will need here. Long-run visions embedded in strong institutions can help us design funding and financing arrangements that fit particular contexts. Funding is key. I think you will all agree with me on that. We have talked the past days about what we strive for, seamless transport, making connections. That's where we want to get. Next year, we'll be back and we'll be talking about funding transport. How are we going to pay for the systems that we have in mind where we want to get? So I look forward to continuing the learning that took place here next year in our summits on funding transport. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt van Dender. That was quite a consummate summary. Anything you feel to add, or should we leave it at that? Then I would like to thank you all very, very much for participating and all the interesting input you've shared here with us. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please, for our panelists. And now I would like to ask you just to remain with us for another couple of minutes, because the conclusion will now be given by Michael Klott, who is the Acting Secretary General of the International Transport Forum.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Dr. Ross. Thank you, Minister Morlock, Mr. Horsley, Mr. Flausch, Mr. Singh, for this very interesting discussion. Also thanks to Kurt, who I've never heard such a good summing up. I'm proud. Very good. This is the end. It's the end of 3 days of the debate, but certainly not the end of the debate, as Kurt, I think, has very aptly pointed out. Themes may change, but there is a thread that connects all this, and we hope that we will see you all again next year. It's been, to me, a wonderful 3 days full of inspiring ideas, a lot of exchange of cards, and exchange of ideas, of views, of knowledge. And ultimately, making transport more seamless is about bringing people from around the world closer together. And in that sense, this was a seamless event, if I can introduce that notion. I also hear from some of you, most of you in fact, that was pretty seamlessly organized, and I would like to thank those responsible for that, the team of Congress Center Leipzig, of CT, the ITF staff, who did marvelous work in the background. I would also like to thank at this point our partners in the private sector, our platinum sponsor DHL. Some of you went on the DHL hub tour and saw what they're actually doing, and that is pretty nice, seamless, I can tell you. Our gold sponsors Airbus and Toll Collect, our sponsors DECRA and Bombardier, and we hope that we will see them again next year. We hope that we will see all of you again next year. If you weren't friends already when you came here, we hope you are friends now. And while it is the end, it is not quite the end, because when you leave this room, there will be a lunch outside. You can have lunch, and then you will have to make maybe the most difficult decision of the summit. That is whether you want to leave or you want to go on the bicycle tour with the mayor of Leipzig in beautiful sunny weather through some of the nicest parts of this town. I'm certainly going. I hope you will be there. See you all next year, 22nd to 24th of May 2013. Thank you.